just wanted to say how simple it is, like
Oh, yeah.
1 + 1 or 1 - 1. There is no minus. That's a really good point, Kyle. Yeah, there. So actually, when I got home last night, my wife asked me a question, and I said, "No, this policy never goes down." And she was like, "Oh, I like
Yeah.
that."
Welcome, everybody, to the Sound Banking Podcast. This is your host, Kyle Reese, and your co-host, Raymond Ward. And today we're just going to spend a little bit of time hearing from Raymond on what his experience was there at the, what would you call it, Raymond? Was it a festival? Was it a farmer's event? What would you call that?
Oh, it's definitely a farmer's event. It's called the Iowa Ag Show,
Okay.
short for agriculture. So it's farmers and ranchers, suppliers for all of the products that go into being a farmer. Everything from combines to trailers, you name it, it was there. And and because I didn't grow up on a farm, I've seen all these things, but boy, when you see them inside of a building, it's enormous.
Was it a
But yeah,
huge
that's what it
building?
was.
All one building?
Actually, it was two buildings that are connected with a catwalk. It's the third largest ag show for farmers in the country. Uh, Nebraska, actually, theirs is at the end of this month in February, the end of the month, and Lincoln, Nebraska, and they are the second largest, and the largest is in, I think it's either Louisville or Lexington, Kentucky. It's the largest one in the country.
Goodness. So how many people came through? Do you know?
I think they project somewhere around 20,000 in 3 days.
That's a ton of people for farming.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it used to be a lot more. Right now, there are about 85,000 farmers, but 2 or 3 or 4 decades ago, there were 3 times that or 4 times that. It
Wow.
was, but like a lot of industry, if you will, they've been going through a consolidation as well as all
Yep.
other industries. So the farmers that stay on, that can keep moving, are getting larger, generally speaking.
Right.
So anyway,
That makes sense. So you mentioned you didn't grow up on a farm. Why go to this farmers event? What do you have in common with them? Why even connect with them?
well, for one thing, where I live, I'm in the middle of corn country, soybean country, hog confinements, cattle, dairy, everything. You go half a mile almost in any direction, and I'm in town. It's a town of about 10,000. I'm in town. But if you go in about a half a mile in any direction, you're in the cornfields.
Oh, wow.
So I am surrounded by it, because it goes all the way, to the East Coast and goes to the West Coast. But this is really the bread, you've heard the phrase bread basket of
Hmm.
America. Well, it really is. It's as far as you can see. Like at your place, when you go outside, you see the rolling mountains and all that as far as you can see.
Hmm.
I, I see corn and soybeans, and it's just
That's
wide
crazy.
open. Yeah, it's just
The
amazing.
other thing I see is just wheat fields. I mean, there's so much wheat that's produced here in Montana. It's unbelievable. It's
Mm,
crazy.
yeah.
But I prefer looking at mountains over wheat, believe it or not.
Yeah.
So you went to this event, and it sounds like you've gotten to know farmers a little bit more since moving to Iowa. You didn't always grow up in Iowa
Right.
around a bunch of farmers.
Right.
Um, so tell me how how infinite banking and what you do now correlates to farming and why you went.
Yeah. Well, so just to finish that first question, why did I want to do that? So it's my location, but I also had learned some stuff about farming and the farmers in their life. Farmers I'm surrounded by corn and soybeans, and most of that goes into corn syrup and you name it. What do I want to say? For gas, they add it to the fuel for our trucks and all that. But also, I discovered how tough it is to be a farmer. There's a lot of obstacles. It's unbelievable how difficult the federal and state and all these regulators make it for farmers. The third and probably the most personal thing for me is that farmers, if it wasn't for farmers, most of us would starve.
Mm.
And so I really wanted to support farmers, and I want to, get this message out that there's a way of taking control of the financial world in your life, that you can become your own banker, if you like. Banking is just a function, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to be able to share with them how they can take back the operation, just even if they just take back the operational cost. So I had this little banner, and on it said, that farming itself has changed drastically in the last century, but the financing of those operations has not changed at all. They still go to the bank every spring, early spring, to lock in their loans and the terms and everything else so they can buy seed and fertilizer and all that and keep going. And that's the way most of them do it. Some actually at the show said, well, I just pay cash. Well, either you're paying interest or you're giving it up. One way or the other. There's no other way around it. It's going out or you're losing it. And so I'm trying to, impress upon them, this is a tool that you can allow yourself to keep that interest in your operation. So, yeah.
And did you find that people were pretty receptive to that thought?
A lot of them, some were, but I have to say that most of them kind of, cock their head and they're like, "What are you saying?" Because it's such a foreign way of thinking about things. Some people, even just the concept that banking is just a function, is nowhere in their mind. They think it's that brick and mortar building, that there's a banker in there, and they don't think of it as a function. Mm. that anybody can do it. So I mean, even if somebody were to come to me, just say for instance, and say I need $500,000 to buy the seed and all this other stuff, it could be whatever, and if I had that money, I could set up a loan, set up with an amortized repayment, and I would be the banker, and they would be the borrower. But inside this whole life dividend insurance, you're all of it. You're the borrower, you're the banker, you set the terms and all that stuff, all inside this product. Most of them kind of cocked their head, but there were some that were immediately intrigued. And that was one of the things that caught my attention, or I started pondering on, was that everybody's wherever they are, in their minds. Are they open-minded? Are they curious? Most people just, we're so inundated with advertising and people trying to get us to do stuff that most of them kind of just glaze over and they walk on by, and they say, how could anybody become how could I become a banker? That's crazy. So
yeah, that's not their role. Their role is to produce food for consumption or whatever,
Yep.
You brought up a point that I find to be interesting. This is it's a new paradigm for everyone who comes to infinite banking. I think about it like the red pill, blue pill. Once you take that pill from, the Matrix, once you take that pill and you see everything, you cannot unsee it. But until you do, you'll never see the reality. You'll never see what's going on. And the more you live and operate in the Matrix, the harder it is to take that pill to see it for what it is. And you mentioned farmers are going to the bank every single year. They're going and getting loans every single year. The way they have operated for years or decades or whatever has been that this is truth. It is truth that I go to the bank and the bank gives me money and the bank is the bank and I am always going to be subject to them. That is their reality, right? But then, I'm sitting down with, my age being a little bit different. I tend to sit down with folks who are younger. And a lot of folks that I talk to are like, yeah, no, that does not make sense. It makes sense that banking is just a function and I can perform it. It makes sense that they're trying to manipulate me and all this other kind of stuff, or they're just trying to take advantage. And so it seems like the longer we live within any construct, the more we believe it. And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
really exciting because the more you live as an infinite banker, as your own banker, the more you believe it. The more you believe something, the better you get at it, whatever it is, whether it's telling people about Jesus Christ, whether it's telling people about infinite banking or, selling solar or selling whatever it is, the more you do of it, the more you believe it and the better you get at it. So start now.
Yeah. 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 And that's an interesting point that a lot, I will say too, a lot of them cocked their heads at me and were like really questioning it. But my enthusiasm cracked open the door.
Mm,
Because I had, the books, here, I had this book by
yep.
Nelson. I had this one by Carlos. I had Becoming Your Own Banker, in the case for IBC. I had all those out and I had QR codes. I said, this will be the best $23 that you've ever invested in your life. If you buy this book and read it and then call me, because you're going to have a ton of questions after you read this book.
Yeah.
And call me. And I want to make this point too. I had an interesting conversation with a guy. When I say call me, I point to this poster I had up, and I would say, you see this right here? This is the Nelson Nash Institute, and I tell him, Nelson wrote these books. He started an institute and he has trained individual life insurance agents about what this is. And he's teaching them about how to design, the blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much that, but, we're learning the concept and all that. And people, I was trying to stress them to contact me because I'm a practitioner and I understand this, how this really works.
Don't call your State Farm agent.
Yeah, don't. And if somebody says, to you, an insurance agent, oh yeah, I know how to do that. You should go to the NNI, Nelson Nash Institute website and see if they are a certified agent. And if they're not, you might want to question them, or
Why is that?
maybe avoid them. Okay, so I had an experience when I was there yesterday morning. It was the last day. It was funny too that I would walk away from my booth, and that's when people would come in.
Oh, that is funny.
That was really interesting, and I think part of it is, I had the name of my company, Blue Sky Financial Flow, and the word financial, and I had down there Nelson Nash Advisor. So they put those two together and they go, oh, he's a financial advisor. I don't need to talk to him. I have one of those, or I don't want to get into it, But I would leave the booth and people would come in. And so this guy pulls up first thing in the morning, and I can tell he's a vendor because he's got the little tag hanging off his neck as a vendor. And I walked up behind him and I said, have you ever seen any of these books? And he goes, oh yeah. He says, I read that one. And he pointed to Becoming Your Own Banker. I said, so did you ever implement it? And he said, yes, I did. A local guy here in Iowa, and he has since passed away. And I said, so are you still practicing it? And he said, no. Who are you with? What insurance company are you with? He says, I'm with Lafayette. And I said,
Oh
oh,
my
good.
gosh.
That's a good company.
Yeah.
And I said, so what happened? And he said, I stopped it. I turned it off. I
Mm.
stopped. I stopped sending them premium. Why'd you do that? Well, I went to take a loan, and I took the loan, and then on my anniversary, I got a bill for the interest that they were saying you should pay this interest. And he said, that's not what my agent told me.
Ah, that's terrible.
He told me that I would capture the interest. And I said, oh, that's too bad because that's not true. And he says, yeah, I know. And he says, and it pissed me off.
Yeah.
And so I walked on it and I said, oh, that's too bad because I would have told you, you don't get the interest. You're paying back the general
Yeah.
fund to release the collateral of your policy. And I would have told you that because I understand that he may not just have not understood it himself. It could
Yeah,
have been
right.
a very honest mistake.
Probably was.
It probably very well was, but it pissed him off enough that he said, I'm done with this. And I said, when was the last time you read the book? He said, 10 years ago when I first found out about it. I said, you should probably pick that book up again and read it. And then give me a call. And we should have another conversation because he's telling me that he and his wife are becoming real estate investors.
Mm.
And I said, this is the perfect tool to complement that.
Oh man, it is.
If you understand it, if you understand the tool and you understand how you can implement it with real estate investing, it's the perfect marriage. So you really should read it again. I said, I try to read this twice a year, at a minimum. And I'm always scanning it, but because there's so many subtleties in the book.
Oh, so many subtleties. You read it twice a year. That's a lot. That's a lot.
Well, yeah,
Good
but
for
it
you.
doesn't take long,
No, I know.
If,
But even rereading any book once is a statement about the quality of that book. Rereading it twice, that's a whole different statement. Doing that every single year, I mean, that's powerful. That's so powerful.
Well, the way I look at it, and I read books. There's a bunch of books that I read multiple times. Like I'm reading a spiritual from some guru in India that has passed away, but it's a classic. And I'm just finishing it for the third time, and it's 400 pages. It takes me like a year and a half to read it because I just read it in the morning every morning.
Mm-hmm.
But every time I read Becoming Your Own Banker, I have changed, from year to year. Whether we think we're not staying the same, we're growing. Whether we think we are or not, we are growing. So every time I go back and revisit it, I'm a different person. I have a different way of thinking about it. And so I pick up on the subtleties a little bit different. Oh, that's what he meant about this. Oh, that's what, that kind of thing. So it's like an onion. You just keep opening it up, keep opening it up.
So tell me, with your clients, do you require that they read it before you have a conversation with them?
I don't. I certainly impress upon them they should, because it's going to speed everything up. But the one thing I would say is they have to read. They don't necessarily have to read Becoming Your Own Banker, but they've got to read something. And it could be that they listen to it too, because the book is out on Audible now.
Yeah.
You can get that on Audible. You have to pick a book. So if you want a shorter one, I don't know how you can get much shorter, but there are some short. There are some. Brian Bloom has 3 short books, and they're all kind of different subjects around it. He's a CPA, but anyway, it's a really small book. It's only like 60 instead of 98 with Becoming Your Own Banker. But they have to get some skin in the game to answer your question. Yeah.
Yep.
It's very helpful. It's very helpful for them, and it's very helpful for our relationship.
Mm.
that it quickly takes off. If
Yeah.
I have to explain every little thing, they're probably going to get frustrated.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and how do you explain it better than Nelson? I think that there's different ways of communicating things that resonate with different people. And
Hmm.
so you have a gift that's different than Nelson's, and you can give that to your clients. But when it comes to the baseline structure and the really what becoming your own banker does is it addresses the thinking behind what it means to be a business person, what it means to be a banker, right? And
Right,
so
right.
for a while, um, I was just telling people I'm a business coach, and the business that I specifically coach is banking. If you want to get into the banking business, you talk to Kyle Reese. That's the way it goes,
Uh-huh.
because
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
what it is. It's
yeah.
very simple. And until you realize that that's all that banking is, it feels very, very uh, what
Intimidating.
intimidating. That's what I was looking for. It is.
Yeah,
Banking is
yeah.
intimidating because that's only things that people that are super wealthy do that have lots of experience with money. It's actually not.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a basic function. You just have to understand
Right.
it.
It's really so simple that it's almost like adding and subtracting.
Hmm.
You add to your policy, you subtract with a loan, but then you put it all back, and and it's like a savings thing vehicle. You see the interest and the dividends growing the whole policy over time.
Careful when you say subtracting, though, because you never subtract from that policy unless you're making withdrawals.
Right. Yeah, 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 yeah. But I guess I just wanted to say how simple it is. Like
Oh, yeah.
1 + 1 or 1 - 1. There is no minus. That's a really good point, Kyle. Yeah, there. So actually, when I got home last night, my wife asked me a question, and I said, "No, this policy never goes down." And she was like, "Oh, I like
Yeah.
that." She didn't understand it. She's very busy with her own job, and I have
Yeah.
not
My
asked her.
wife's the same way. She
Yeah,
doesn't she doesn't know all this. She goes, "I trust you, Kyle. You've been
yeah,
studying this for, half a
yeah.
decade now. I'm not going to question you on all this stuff." And then she'll ask a question about it, and I'll say whatever it is, and she goes, "You sound really smart." I'm like, "Score." Uh,
Yeah, yeah. So that was good last night when she was like, "Oh, I like that."
yeah. That's awesome.
Uh,
Hey, were there any other vendors there from any other infinite banking vendors?
no,
No.
nobody else.
Hmm.
Nobody else.
I'm surprised because there's quite a few practitioners who do deal specifically with farmers.
Yeah, there's actually the most famous one, I guess you could say, within our infinite banking community is Mary Jo Ehrman
Yeah.
out of North Dakota, and she's written a book. But she's been at it a bit longer than me and you, you and I.
Hmm.
And so her business has grown considerably. So she's doing other things at a different level, um, in a different way. But she certainly used to do this, go to farm shows and stuff. And she probably could have been at any one in somewhere else in the country for all I know at the time. Um, but there was nobody else. When people come to the booth, they're really intrigued, in the sense that, how can this be, and how come I've never heard about it before? Well, this, is, what do we got? 300, and I've heard the numbers, 380,000 life insurance people in the United States that have licenses, but most of them are not that active. And then
Mm-mm.
there's, you cut it way down. There's only a 1 or 2%, maybe. I don't even think it's 2%. It's not even. It might not. It's probably not even 1% actually understand infinite banking.
And there's probably 5% of the agents that write, high cash value or IUL or whatever kind of investment life insurance they want to call it. Probably about 5, 6, 7% of the agents do that, maybe. And probably only 1% really understand what it means to be a
Right.
banker.
Yeah. 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 Even the bankers don't. Like I've had bankers at other shows. I've done other shows too. to the general public. And I've had I had a banker come up to the table and saw the book, Becoming Your Own Banker. And we talked a little bit. And then he finally said, well, I'm a banker. And I said, oh, well, that's great. I said, do you understand? You've heard the phrase fractional reserve banking. And he goes, no. And I
Oh
was
my
like,
gosh.
and you're the president of this bank. But you and I both know, I don't know if you've heard the story, but Carlos Lara used to give 1-2 day seminars on this concept just to bankers.
Hmm.
And he would ask that question. How many of you know what fractional reserve banking is? And maybe one or two would raise their hand, but a lot of times nobody raised their hands. And they're in the
Well,
business.
well, tell me, what is fractional reserve banking?
Okay, so you go to the bank and you give them $1. You
Mm-hmm.
give them $1. They end up loaning out $10. How can they do that? Well, it's it's the way I look at it is it's a legalized cartel
Mm-hmm.
that nobody else can get away with that. If anybody tries to get away with it, they're locked up. But
Yeah.
it's the way that the Federal Reserve set things up for them. That these are the rules, and you can go this far. And I've been told recently, within the last few months, that now there is no reserve requirement.
Yeah. So maybe to
Do you
clarify a
know
little bit.
anything about that?
Yeah.
Do you know anything?
So to clarify a little bit, fractional reserve banking is loans or assets and accounts or deposits, whatever they have with their clients, however
Yep.
they want to call that. Those are
Yeah.
liabilities to them, right? So
Yes.
they are only required to keep on reserve a fraction of what they lend out as an asset to go make money. So if you deposit $1, that becomes theirs, right? You're actually giving it to them, and they write you an IOU note, whatever. And they only have to keep on reserve 10%. That's been how it's been for a long time. One of the things that changed during COVID was the fractional reserve banking, and they changed it from 10% reserve requirement down to 0% reserve requirement. I think that was in March of 2021. I believe that was March of 2021. I don't remember the exact date. I could be wrong on that. But yeah, it's now 0. So you don't even have to lend anything to, or you don't have to deposit anything to a bank for them to lend out that much. And then you look at how many banks have failed. Holy cow. You wonder why. Because they're not practicing honest banking.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I find that's I can't even imagine that they would. Why would they do that during COVID? Why was that?
Come on, man. Why do they do anything during these times? It's all distractions. It's all distractions so that they can implement something under the radar. And even the people that are paying attention are so distracted that they don't catch it.
Yeah.
That's the narrative we live in.
Yeah, they want to take advantage of the opportunity. While we're looking over here, they're doing something over here.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's sad.
I had another gentleman. I'll just tell you this quickly. This big Norwegian-looking guy comes up to the booth, and he's got his little daughter. She might have been 2 or 3, 2 years old probably, in his arms. And he was a big guy, big blonde beard and everything. And he came up to me, and he's got his eyes are like wide open. And I said, have you seen this before? And he goes, yeah. He says, I'm reading that book, Becoming Your Own Banker. He said, but I am so happy that I have found a practitioner. He said he didn't know about the Nelson Nash Institute. You have to go digging for it, but he didn't know that you could go there and find a practitioner. He says, I am so happy I found a practitioner, and I found one here in Iowa.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. So he was so excited that I said, well, finish the book and give me a call. We'll talk. So that was good. People come to this at all different levels,
Hmm.
just all kinds of levels. It's
Come
it,
to becoming your own banker at all different kinds of levels, or come to the farming event?
they yeah they come to it with different levels of understanding. But let's just say that most of them come and don't have never heard of it,
Hmm.
even though you'd think that from our perspective, it seems like everybody it knows
I
about it,
know.
but that isn't the case. Um, so it's really important to continue doing podcasts like this and getting the message out, because there are so many people that need to know about this. In my opinion, everybody's got to know about this, or should know about it. So
I think that everybody who wants a little bit more control in their life should know about it. I
yeah,
was,
yeah,
if you don't want that, if you want to rent everything for the rest of your life, if you want to pay everybody else for what you have for the rest of your life, great, do it. If that makes you happy, by all means, go for it. But if you want control, and if you want to set your kids up and their kids and their kids, and talk about just this multi-generational legacy that you want to leave, that is full of prosperity and wealth, this is a great way to do that. I'm not saying this is the tool that's going to get you all of that, but it's the thinking, the paradigm shift that changes, and starting to practice this, that it changes everything. I always tell my clients that tools and gimmicks, they're here one day and they're gone the next. And a lot of
mm,
people view infinite banking as a gimmick or as a tool. Like, oh, great, it's available right now, but how do I know it's going to be here in 10 years? Well, yeah, I can't predict the future. Maybe there will be no insurance in 10 years. I have no idea. But what does pass through time, not tools and gimmicks, what passes through time is a way of doing life. And the way you change that is by changing your thinking. The way you change your thinking is by changing what goes into your mind. Start reading this stuff. Start behaving in accordance with what you're reading. And you can't help but impact your children and your children's children, unless you've already burned all those bridges. But
yeah,
still,
yeah. That this is a tool that you want to perpetuate
mm, that's a good
throughout,
word.
and we you might think that, okay, I'm going to start a policy and I'm going to start this banking function, and what am I going to get out of it? And actually, I think of it in terms of, yeah, you will definitely get something very positive out of it, but what is really going to happen is that your children and your grandchildren are really going to see it working
Mm,
in a way that, personally, that I probably won't, because of how many years I may have left here on the planet. But the people that are going to be here for generations, they are going to see the immense power of that, being
mm-hmm.
in control as a family. Like Nelson, if you watched the documentary they made on him, this is Nelson Nash. There's a section there where he's sitting in his chair, and they're filming the kids, his grandkids, down on the floor in front of him, and he says these kids will never see the inside of a bank because we are the bank.
What a powerful statement.
It's so cool. That is so cool. It's really awesome. Yeah, I had a lot of interesting conversations. It was just a great experience, and definitely going to go back next year.
That's awesome. What would you say was one of the biggest takeaways that you had personally for yourself?
I think that when I'm reflecting on it, that for me to be so well versed in it that I can ramp it up for somebody that's down the road a ways, or has been practicing it, and maybe even the gentleman that had started it and had and dropped it.
Mm,
Let's see if we can get being able to meet people where they are, and to be able to speak to them, because you want them to become intrigued, you want to open up their mind, you want them to have the confidence. If you're just reading the book, you know spend $23 on the book. That's not a huge investment for something that somebody tells you this is going to change your life. for me to continue to learn how to speak about it and be able to pick up on those cues where they are and do it quickly because you don't have a lot of time in the booth.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I would say that's probably pretty good. So I put it on myself, to be there for them where they are and to try to open up their minds to it.
That's awesome. Well, Raymond, thank you for sharing about your experience there. It was encouraging for me because there's always those questions like, what is the best way to get out there and share the message? Really, it is to just talk about it, to put yourself in a position where people are coming and asking you questions. And
Yep.
it sounds like that's what you did, and you had some great lessons for yourself, and were also able to share the message and at least plant some seeds, right?
Yeah. Yeah. There was the very first guy that came on the first day came into the booth and he said he had read the book, but he was not completely convinced. He says, "Okay, if I have $1,000,000, where would you tell me to put it?" And I said, "Well, I would ask you to start a policy, tell you to start a policy, and it's going to take a few years to get all the million, unless you're going to put $1,000,000 in, for
Every year.
eternity
Yeah.
every year. It might take a little while to get it in there." And he says, "Well, why wouldn't I just take that million?" He says, "Well, what kind of returns on it?" I said, "It's not about the returns."
Hmm.
But he said, "Why wouldn't I just take the $1,000,000 and give it to Berkshire Hathaway?" And I said, "You should put it in the policy first and then take it and give it to Berkshire Hathaway if that's what you want to do." But then your money is working in two places. But
Yep.
most people are thinking of returns on investment and all of that, and it isn't about that. It's about having control, the certainty of growth, and a whole slew of other things. The other thing is you put it in with Berkshire Hathaway, and when they do have gains, you're going to pay taxes on that because you have a silent partner known as the IRS.
And how much do they take?
Oh, depending on your tax bracket and depending on the tax bracket as of today.
I think
Where do
a
you think they're going to go, those tax brackets? We're in the lowest tax bracket in history right now. So which way are
yeah,
they going to
yeah.
go? Up.
My It's funny, when people ask me how much they're going to take, or when that question ever comes up, I ask them whatever. The answer is always the same. And no matter what time it is, no matter whether it's today or 5 years from now or 50 years from now, they take however much they want to take and they give you the rest. Do you
Yeah.
trust them?
Not at all.
Oh, not at all. And there ain't nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. No, yeah. They are. The other thing is the farmers will say, well, I like my banker. We're friends. I've been doing business for 30 years with them. I say, well, someday if if the crops don't make you enough money and you fall short on that repayment, structure, it isn't your friend that's going to come after you. It's the board that's going to ask your friend to come after you
Mm-hmm.
because they are servitude to them. And the board doesn't care. If you can't make the payment, we're going to need a piece of equipment. We're going to need you to sell some cattle. You're going to have to do something to raise the money. And so speaking of a silent partner, when you're using the bank for something like that, you have a silent partner. So
Yeah. Well, now you've got two silent partners, the IRS and the bank.
yes, yeah.
You mentioned something earlier. I just want to touch on maybe before we wrap this up. No, you mentioned that you have become well versed in infinite banking to the degree that you can meet people where they're at, and that is important. Do you think that there was an element of that in Nelson that really helped him in his ability to grow and really spread the message?
Yes. For many years when he first tried to get this message out there, he struggled. He'd have a hotel room set up and nobody would show up. But his patience with people to me, was just wonderful, that he was so patient with people. He would talk to a room full of people, or he'd talk to one person, and he would talk to them over and over and over. He would even talk to the practitioners and say, "So how's it going? What are you doing?" And if he saw them veering off he would kind of pull them back in line. He was such a gracious, giving, loving guy. As far as I know, I didn't meet him. I just missed him, like yourself. And well, I shouldn't say that. Did you actually ever meet him?
I didn't meet him. He was still alive when I was starting my process of becoming a practitioner and all that stuff, and when I learned about it, but I didn't get to meet him.
Yeah, I just missed him, but there's certainly plenty of recordings and all of that kind of stuff in books.
I'm so grateful for all of that.
Yeah, you really get a sense that he would meet people where they are.
And a lot of that is because he understood, not because he had the book knowledge that some people struggle and some people are affluent, but he struggled and he was affluent. I mean, he had the whole gambit of financial background as a real estate agent, a real estate investor, as a forester, as a pilot, as an insurance agent, having no money, going into debt, having a lot of money. And it seemed like he was able to take all of those experiences and not necessarily use them, but it changed him to be a very understanding and patient person. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. Just a really gracious man, and real believer in God and all of that. So he leaned on that, and asked people. If somebody came to him with a question, he wouldn't necessarily answer it. He would come back with another question to get them to think about it. This is, ask a question in such a way that you're asking them to think it through to answer their own question, because then they own the knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't hear, powerful. They own it themselves. They know it to be true in their own bones. Very patient man.
That's so cool. Yeah. Well, hey, Ray, thank you for telling us about your experience there. And do you have any final thoughts before we close it down?
Can't say I do. I think I covered the people that were most prominent in my mind this morning. I didn't have time to write down some notes and all, but I think that's about it, Kyle.
Cool. Well, thank you for sharing. And as always, thank you guys, you listeners, for listening in, tuning in. And don't forget to subscribe, whether you're watching on YouTube or the podcast. We'll be coming out with content regularly, and with at least every 2 weeks, probably closer to every week. And we just look forward to sharing more with you guys, and we hope you learn from it. Thank you for joining us on the Sound Banking Podcast. If you're listening on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe and click on the notification bell. Otherwise, join us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify for more content.